Alola, Imperials! The Alola region has so many fantastic locations and experiences. It's like something out of a travel magazine. And the breadth of new and exciting material helped make Generation 7 one of the most enjoyable ever. That being said, as for actual new Pokémon, this generation is somewhat lacking in quantity compared to the norm. But actually, most of them are pretty high quality entries, and with so few to choose from, it made it really tough to find enough for this list. But regardless, here are the top 6 Alola Pokémon I have a problem with. Number 6. Toucannon. Okay, just to start off, I do not hate Toucannon, but by definition, I do have a problem with him. A toucan as a Pokémon was bound to happen eventually, and a tropical region such as this is the perfect place to do that. What doesn't fit as well is the rest of his line that he comes from. Again, a woodpecker Pokémon is a great idea, but why exactly are the two connected? It doesn't make any sense to me. First of all, as shown by the problem that they ran into, their beaks fill entirely different functions. The remedy to this was to add an awkward middle stage with a sturdy but flimsy tipped beak. He's weird and doesn't make any sense, but that's not Trumbeak's fault. He wouldn't have to be that way if they didn't try and force a connection between these birds that really have no business being related. A woodpecker Pokémon could have easily done justice to all 3 stages of the line, and if they absolutely had to have a connection, they maybe could have pulled off a hummingbird, but a toucan should just have its own spot in the Pokédex, and would probably work better if it weren't the regional bird, but that's just me. Personally, I kind of expected Pikipek to turn into a grass and flying type, being a woodpecker, but I guess that wouldn't go over as well in a generation with a grass and flying starter. In addition to Toucannon being out of place in his line, he's just too simple for my taste. I mean, this is Generation 7. Can we not have something a bit more elaborate than a ticked-off Toucan Sam? What is it with this generation and cereal mascots? With the exception of the Beak Blast, why isn't he a fire type again? He's just a regular toucan. And that is awesome in real life, but less so when you're facing down a world full of monsters. Number 5. Brionne. Brionne? 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 Anyway, I received some blowback from putting Brionne on my worst Metal Evolutions list, and that's fine. I can see where some people might like this Pokémon. I'm just not one of them. So, I'm sticking to my guns and saying that I do have a problem with Brionne. Primarina is actually quite a lovely Pokémon that's fairly useful. A mermaid seal from a Dr. Seuss book is an interesting concept for a starter, but Brionne doesn't seem to live up to that potential. Popplio was the least popular, so Brionne did have a slight disadvantage to begin with, but I just can't get over the bubble thing. They all have emphasis on the water bubbles they use, but Brionne seems to take it way too far. It's got literal bubbles growing out of its head, which I suppose are the ears, but it's way over the top compared to the other two. And I already mentioned the hoop skirts that make it look like it's late for the sock hop. And maybe the most ridiculous part is the fact that it's called the Pop Star Pokémon, and is described to be like a teen pop idol, also known as some of the most annoying brand of people to persist in society. So the last thing we need is a Pokémon based on that. It would feel far less jarring if they toned back on their aspirations and just stuck to being the best siren they could be. Okay, I think that about covers it. You can go ahead and blast me in the comments now if you want, even though it's extremely likely that I'm going to end up using one as a starter anyway when I play through Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. Number 4. Drampa. I thought this thing was a joke when I first saw it. A Chinese dragon is a good concept from which to draw, but the outcome here looks preposterously cartoonish. I get that he's a gentle Pokémon, but why is he always a grandpa? Even straight from an egg, he's an old geezer. Is it just to say how old the country of China is? Or is it a stereotype about Kung Fu masters being old guys? Either way, if they're going to have an elderly Pokémon, it needs to evolve from something. Even if it were literally just an egg with feet, anything would help ease the idea that this is what a baby version looks like. I understand that he's the version-exclusive alternate to Turtonator, who, although I've never used, looks fine. You could give Turtonator a pre-evolution too. Just make Drampa the end of somebody's line. I mean, imagine if Mega Alakazam was its own standalone Pokémon. You'd be wondering how it got there and how it looks so mature by itself. It wouldn't make any sense. Normal Dragon isn't anything too special, just a type combination to check off the box for, but this is still far from the best that they could have done. Personally, I've toyed with the idea of a dragon and normal type pseudo-legendary of sorts, and came up with the idea of something like the Morrow Dogs from Heroescape. Anyone else play that game? It would have to be far less grotesque, but I think something like that could have served them better than this weird offshoot of Dunsparce. Oh yeah, you didn't know that? People thought this should have been a Dunsparce evolution because of the same general colors, the shared normal typing, as well as the same shared dopiness. Anything that's only claim to fame is a possible connection to the terrible Dunsparce is in for some rough times. Number 3. Crabominable. Crabrawler was interesting. I'm always happy to have crustacean Pokemon, especially since it surprised us all by not even being a water type. Plus, his quirky habit of only showing up in piles of berries makes him even more endearing. Then when he evolves, he turns into this hideous monster. It's like a were-crab, or more like a were-yeti crab. And yes, he's technically based on a creature commonly called the yeti crab, but it's not a real yeti, people! I get the change to an abominable snowman, I guess, but why is he so unkempt? His new fur is going all over the place, not to mention his dumb mop top and his buck teeth. He used to be a scrappy but respectable fighter, and now he's been downgraded into some kind of mindless beast. His boxing gloves turned into weird paw fist pincers that look like they're bent at painfully awkward angles. While adding the ice type does make sense with the Yeti theme, and is a rather fascinating and unique combination, it's undercut by the fact that Crabominable is the only new ice type in the entire Alola region. Seriously, this is it! Unless you count the Alolan forms, which I don't any more than I count the Mega Evolutions towards the Kalos Dex. This punk is all the representation of ice we get for the whole region. Not even any of the Ultra Beasts. And one of the worst parts is that you can't even get him until the very end of the game. This Pokemon will only evolve into an ice type on the top of the mountain where the Pokemon League is, which you can't reach until you've already done basically everything. Location-based Pokemon are fine, but to make it so late in the game is absurd, especially for such a disappointment like this one. Number 2. Kommo-o and Kommo-o. I promise, I like Dragon Pokemon. This is probably another unpopular opinion, but let me explain. When Mo-o came out, I fell in love with this thing. It was so cute and cool, with abundant promise as to what it might turn into, especially with his amazing abilities. Looking at it, I was convinced he would turn into some amazing Ankylosaurus or something. And I remember thinking how cool it would be that a pseudo-legendary might finally stay on all fours. But none of that came to pass. Instead, we got these guys. Kommo-o and Kommo-o stand up on their hind legs and just start shoving scales all over the place. Anywhere they'll fit, really, or even places that it doesn't. The idea could be interesting, but they start to look less like scales and more like sliced pieces of fruit, which would just improve the flavor, not protect them. They just seem too busy. I don't know where to look, especially on Kommo-o, since he's got extra streamers covered in the stuff. I know other cute dragons eventually turn into big tough guys, but here it just seems like a bigger shame, since these two took a design that was working and messed it all up. It's also likely that I have distaste for them because they forced Mo-o into becoming a fighting type, which, as we all know, is my least favorite. But being a fighting and dragon type with huge fists, you'd think he had a physical attack stat through the roof, but it's only 110. That sounds like a lot, until you realize that it's the same as Dodrio and Gumshoes. And worse than Komala's! You call yourself a threat? I will admit that this entry is largely personal, and basically stems from my imagination running wild with the first images of this amazing little guy, and then being disappointed when reality didn't follow suit. It may not be reasonable, but I want my Ankylosaurus Pokemon. And no, Torterra doesn't count. Maybe I'll just do a playthrough where I keep him in his base form the whole time, so that I'll actually be able to like him in the end. Number 1. Shiinotic. Shiinotic? I don't know if that's right because I've literally never heard anyone talk about this Pokemon, but that's what I'm going with. What is this? Why do we need more mushrooms? We don't even have an Ankylosaurus yet, but we've got a whole team full of fungus? It looks like Pleakley and Toad had a baby. That is a sentence that no one should ever have to utter. Morlul was one of the very few Pokemon from the trailers that underwhelmed people. When he evolved, he became so much worse. Is it supposed to look like a table lamp? It has crap speed and garbage on almost every other stat besides an aggressively mediocre special side. Not that it has the move pool to back it up, it mostly learns utility moves. But despite this, Shiinotic is the only grass type that can't learn any weather moves whatsoever. And it can have the Rain Dish ability. Not to mention its shiny form looks like poop. Apparently its mushrooms glow, which sounds neat until you read its Pokédex entry. The forests where it lives are dangerous because their stupid lights confuse people enough to be lost forever. That's bad on its own until you read the next Dex entry. This Pokemon intentionally lure in others in order to drain their energy. They make you lose your way only to soothe you to sleep so they can wrap their disgusting, slender fingers around you and drain away all your life force. This Pokemon is a creep and a predator, and I don't ever want to run into one. But there's not much danger of that because this thing is not on anyone's radar in any serious capacity, which is for the best. The last thing we need is to be plagued by more disgusting mold that's just waiting for a chance to end your life. So, those are the top 6 Alola Pokemon I have a problem with. Which Alolan Pokemon do you find problematic? Does anyone out there like Shiinotic? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!